Hi, I'm Abby. I'm with LDV Capital. We invest in people building businesses powered by visual technology. We thrive on collaborating with deep technical teams that leverage computer vision, machine learning, and artificial intelligence in order to analyze visual data. Thanks so much for tuning into our series, Women Leading Visual Tech. The purpose of these series is to highlight some of the top ladies whose work in visual technologies are revolutionizing business and society. We hope that by cultivating this community, we find a lot of women and underrepresented genders who are working in visual technologies and interested in helping each other succeed. In this series, I speak with Chen Zhang. She's the CEO and co-founder of Aquifer. At LDV, we've had the privilege of leading Aquifer's $2 million seed round to make animation as easy as point and shoot. Chen, before she began Aquifer, she previously led teams in designing and developing new products and XR experiences for Fortune 500 companies at Part-Time Evil, was an immersive studio that she co-founded. Before that, she led product strategy and brand marketing at Frog Design, Under Armour, VRBO, and she also consulted for Gensler. Chen is a first-generation immigrant from China, and we had a really great discussion about her founder journey so far. I hope that you enjoy listening and let us know what you think. Hi, Chen. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Abby. So good to be here with you.
So the way that we always typically start these things out is by asking you, how would you describe what you do to a 2-year-old?
I love this question. Okay, so I run a company that has built a technology that allows companies and teams to create animated video and shows very quickly in minutes, instead of taking days, weeks, or months, which is how long it would usually take if they were going out and finding experts to do that work.
I think that my daughter would be mind-boggled if she knew that Masha and the bear took so long to create, and so it'd be very meaningful to her to say that like you could create a gazillion new episodes of Masha and the bear as quickly as possible.
Right, like you could create a new episode of Cocomelon in minutes versus I believe right now it takes 6 weeks. Yeah,
6 weeks per episode of Cocomelon.
Mm-hmm. They have teams that run concurrently so that they can put out weekly episodes, but it takes 6 weeks to make one episode.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Cocomelon, for anybody out there who doesn't have a child, like you should Google it right now. They are masterful in the world of YouTube cartoons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What got you interested in this area? Like, why did you decide to build Aquifer?
Yeah, so I actually like sort of stumbled into the world of 3D through my work. So I, was earlier in my career overseeing digital experiences, primarily for marketing and brand for at the time HomeAway.com, VRBO. So I very much like understood the world of kind of creative asset production, from like real-time production to like digital asset production, and knew what it was like to work with vendors and studios to get that kind of work done. Where it sort of flip-flopped for me was my co-founder and I were running an AR, VR, and 3D content studio. And it was there that I saw firsthand how powerful these experiences were for viewers and users of AR and VR, and how immersive it could be, and how educational and entertaining it could be, beyond kind of normal content that was shot, but also knew firsthand how expensive it was to produce that content. And we were getting frustrated that we couldn't work faster as a studio. And so my co-founder, Matt, actually created the first version of Aquifer so that we as a studio could just work faster. And then what we saw was folks like me or other artists on the team that are not professional CG animators could actually just make content and sort of be hands-on involved. And that's when we realized, like, whoa, there's a bigger potential for this than just a way for our studio to work faster. What if we could put this directly into the hands of, people that were our customers at the time? So like marketers, folks running learning and education teams at large corporations, what could they do with a platform like Aquifer?
Fascinating. And so, like before you and Matt started working together at the studio and building all of this, like, is this something that you've been doing like in your spare time? Are you like a huge consumer of immersive content? Or, because I think a lot of times there's kind of this stigma that immersive content is only VR and it's like a bunch of dudes playing games on a headset. But that's not
Yeah.
really what it is at all, right?
Mhm. No,
So
no,
where
I
did
think
like
I've
your passion
been,
for it come?
yeah, I mean, I in my career, I've always just been involved with kind of emerging technologies as it um, came along with how consumers wanted to engage. So I remember a project I worked with at the time at Samsung's agency of record was an NFC project. I don't know if you remember NFCs, but
No.
it was this way that Samsung phones could like pass data and content just by putting them close to each other. And so we created this like touchscreen experience that was embedded into like street bus stations and airports where Samsung phone customers could tap their Samsung phones against this touchscreen and get books and videos and songs downloaded for
Fascinating.
free. And I think that's obviously not AR and VR, but this was like back in 2010 when it was like, okay, what can you deliver to a device and have and engage with someone outside of kind of the typical way of just like reading or watching, how else can you engage them? So I think I've always been really interested in that. And that led me to a 3-year role working in design consulting for the Department of Defense to help them figure out kind of the next generation of cyber defense software and how they can use gamification and AI and 3D data visualization to help cyber operators who are fresh high school grads with no experience in cyber defense, how you can really cut down like decision-making timeframes just through different ways of visualizing what decisions they had to make.
So not like Ender's Game at all is essentially what you're saying.
So exactly, no, not at all.
That's neat. And so like you're like, okay, first, how can you interact with content differently? It automatically segues you into like this immersive content. And then you guys just found like this like incredibly compelling use case where you're like,
Mhm.
everybody needs this. We need to bring this to the world. And so you made the jump to becoming an entrepreneur. Like what made you and Matt want to do that?
I don't know, is like it just felt like there were no other options. Like, we saw this potential and I just couldn't imagine like having this in our hands and seeing the potential and just letting it be an internal tool. It felt like a crime to not try to share this with the world. And so,
It sounds like
I didn't,
that was kind of like wholly you, right? Like would Matt have
yeah,
been like happy like using it for the studio and improving your own processes, and you're like, no, the world needs this.
I think like he creates, like he's a creator. He creates like experiences and films and products. And I'm always like really looking out and seeing like, can this solve big problems for other people? And how can I take something that he and the team has built and give it like value and put it into the hands of people and give them new talents and new expertise and skill sets that they wouldn't have had ordinarily. I think that's just kind of like how I'm wired, and that's just like how I think.
Where did that come from?
Um, it's hard to say. I mean, I think like I'm one of those like high level granular thinkers where I sort of just like jump back and forth all day, every day. And it's this constant like, okay, there's this micro thing I'm thinking about and doing. At a macro level, how can it have impact? How does it have impact? And then coming back and using that to figure out like, is this micro thing I'm doing worth doing? Like, is there something bigger here? And I think I've always just been that way. I don't know. I can't explain it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I love that. Like, is there something bigger here? Like, is this a small
Mm-hmm.
piece of a bigger chunk of the world? Um,
Yeah.
you know, Did you envision the challenges of entrepreneurship before you began down this road?
No.
What's
No,
been
I
like, what's been the
actually,
biggest thing for you guys to overcome?
yeah, I mean, I don't think growing up, lots of entrepreneurs have those stories where they're like, in my high school, I sold scrunchies and then I made $16,000 on scrunchies. That was never really me. I think, I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents are first generation immigrants, and they had me on a very straight path to go to school, get a great degree, do well, find a really nice job, do really, really well, overperform at that job, make everyone's lives easier around you at your job, and just be good, have stability, and stay there. And so I didn't necessarily have aspirations of being an entrepreneur, but my parents, my mother especially, she didn't have like a US college education or anything, and didn't speak English when she came here, but she had been running a successful art business on her own for decades. So even though she told me don't be an entrepreneur, what she modeled was being an awesome entrepreneur and building something out of nothing. And so I think, like, in my heart and in my soul, that was always there. And so there were a couple of like tries when I was younger and earlier in my career. I actually made like a connected foam roller because I was really into health and fitness, still am.
That's
And
cool.
tried to kind of figure out where I could take it, and met up with some people, got their feedback on the prototype. And then it just turned out like, oh, manufacturing is this whole crazy thing that makes like a startup really challenging. And so that didn't work out. But I think since then, had been always thinking about how can I make impact? Like what is a product or an experience that could change lives or change people's work out in the world? And with Aquifer, that all kind of came together.
That's great. And so, if you had to, put your finger on one thing that was totally unexpected in this journey, right? Like it sounds like, the foam roller, you're like, oh wait, manufacturing. Don't want to get into that whatsoever. Is there something like in the process of building this that you weren't anticipating at all? That you're like, wow, this is a much bigger issue, or it's much harder than I ever anticipated that it would be, and nobody ever told me about from the outside, and I wish I had known.
Hmm. I think just the kind of self belief and motivation that you have to bring a viable business out into the world. Like a lot of people think, and I certainly did when I was younger, like it's all about the product, it's all about the idea. Once you like build the thing, build it and they will come. That is
Mm.
absolutely not true. And that was like a lesson that I think a lot of entrepreneurs learn at the beginning, is that it's not as easy as build it and they will come. There's actually a ton of work that goes into finding the market. You can have a great product, but if there's no market for it, it will never succeed. And I think for Aquifer, we had an instinct about what that market might be, but it's taken exploration. It's taken a lot of hard work to go out there and get the numbers and get the data to support who exactly we should be selling into and why they would pay to use a product like Aquifer.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I know that like that's kind of been part of our conversation since the onset, right? Like as we were talking about LDV investing, you and we ended up leading, your seed round.
Mhm.
Um, we talked a lot about like who could use this, and it seemed like, like the possibilities are endless, right? Like everybody is going to need this. It's going to be a part of everybody's, future strategy when it comes to brand and IP management. Um,
Mhm.
but right now, like you're trying to really focus in on like who for this instant has already identified this as a giant pain point that you can
Yep.
go be the morphine for, right?
Yep.
And so who are you honing in on at the moment? Who do you think is that sweet spot where you want to start out and really want to target your first customers?
Mm-hmm. We've definitely honed in on media and entertainment, particularly organizations and brands that are targeting a younger generation, so specifically Gen Z or younger. And I think the reason we're doing that is because Gen Z, they grew up with the concept of animation as being just a part of their everyday experience, whether it was through, really awesome Pixar movies or through video games that are now absolutely sort of like the number one kind of form of entertainment preferred by younger people. So for older generations, there's definitely like an inclination towards live action, but and animation is nice. But I think for younger folks, whether it's like animated art, NFTs, AR, VR experiences, games, films, even the idea of virtual influencers, none of that takes explanation. They've just grown up with it. It's very much a part of their day-to-day. And the idea of kind of like interacting with avatars or interacting with characters is not new or weird. It's just part of life. And so we're definitely seeing that sales conversation and that value conversation be shorter and faster if we're approaching brands and companies that are targeting younger audiences.
It makes a ton of sense. That's amazing to me that it's their number one like gaming is their number one choice of like, activity. That's fascinating. But for all of us who are not Gen Zers, right? Like, what do you actually mean by virtual influencer? What does that incorporate?
I think a virtual influencer is really any persona that's not like a live action shot human person. Like shot on, film or digital. And I think that the reason why we're talking about the concept of virtual influencers and virtual talent more now than ever is because the technology to create characters that look compelling and real and that are emotive has really, evolved over the 2000s to be more accessible. And so the creation, think like Geico Gecko, virtual Barbie, think, the like sausage guy on TikTok that does every single new TikTok dance and now has like 5+ million subscribers. The technology to make that kind of content is more accessible to those people that have technical skills and can build. However, there is a whole world of people who don't have those types of technical skills. So you have this mismatch between like the consumption of animated content and the number of people who have the technical skills to create animated content that is of a high quality. And that gap is where we see Aquifer really delivering the most value, is that we know this kind of content is going to grow. We know that virtual influencers and virtual talent and virtual characters are going to become more and more part of our lives, with the emergence of the metaverse, with the concept of having virtual identity, and just the need for more entertainment and education content out there in the world. And so we want to be the platform that enables today teams and tomorrow anyone to be able to create really high quality animation.
Absolutely. And it makes, a lot of sense, especially when you're thinking about it in the context that, we interact so much as ourselves online right now, right? Like with like this like perfect representation of who we are via our photos or our videos, because that's the easiest one to do. That's what's in our hand. But would we really represent ourselves this way if we had the technical ability to represent ourselves in a different way? Like, would we really be ourselves on this call right now if we instead could be like something else? And so like putting that into the hands of people is, as you mentioned, like, next step into the metaverse, right? And there's so much hype around like the metaverse right now. And so to you, what does metaverse mean?
I think the metaverse is any like digital or online community or form of communication that is not, just two people in a room or in a physical space talking to each other. So I think it's inclusive of social media networks. I think it's inclusive of games. It's inclusive of like virtual, immersive, social experiences like VR chat. So I don't think it's a singular metaverse. I think there's going to be tons of these little networks and these universes where we get to show ourselves to that world in different ways depending on context. I obviously I show myself in a very different way on LinkedIn than I do on Instagram. Like I don't post my vacation photos on LinkedIn, but I do on Instagram. And I think it's going to be a similar situation in the metaverse where we may choose to adopt slightly different versions of our persona, virtual identities, to engage with other people in different contexts. And we sort of see the same thing happening with brands, right? Like Burger King on Twitter has a very specific personality. And they're snarky, they're sarcastic. And so we see brands now taking on this kind of like personified way of engaging, because frankly, that's how we as humans, that's how we want to connect with other identities. And so I think the very next step for brands is to further personify and have virtual physical representations of that brand. And they would engage differently in different platforms as well. So it's definitely like this mass humanization or personification, if you want to call it, of how we engage in the future.
That's such a great point, right? Like, because one of the big findings that everybody has is that like a brand on Twitter doesn't nearly do as well if you're like interacting as a company as if you are interacting as the CEO of that company, right? Or but that's really hard to control because your CEO changes, every 10 years or more. Versus if you have a brand character or characters, a whole suite of them who are consistently, managed by the brand itself. But are those personas that people get to interact with? And if you want like the snarky king, like you can follow the snarky king and interact with him. And if instead you want, I don't know, the nice hamburger clown, you can interact with a nice hamburger clown, right?
Exactly.
So the brand as a whole. It's really interesting. Do you think that, as the world changes over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you really see as Aquifer's role in that? Is it helping the brands personify themselves? Is it going to eventually be, like people? Are everyday people going to be able to record a virtual, video or an animated video just as easily as we do a TikTok today? What's Aquifer's big vision?
Yeah, well, our big vision is to make the creation of CG and animated content as easy as whatever is kind of like the most common form of creation out there in the world at that point in time. So, our belief is that making a 3D animated scene should be just as easy as making a TikTok video with you and your friends. Like, we have these incredibly powerful devices in our hands that have amazing cameras and amazing microphones, and you can shoot movies with the latest iPhone in terms of quality. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that with Aquifer. So our immediate plan and what we've done today is make like an animation analogy to point and shoot that feels like point and shoot. It feels like recording a selfie video, but what you're actually doing is grabbing that data and manipulating scenes and characters just as easily. And then the next step is to continue to use AI to make creation even easier. Sometimes if you're just thinking about, oh my gosh, what should I make for my next TikTok video? I think there are a lot of those like even creative decisions that AI can help make. What's the best camera angle? How quickly should you have these cuts move depending on music? I think the TikTok platform does a great job of making some of those decisions for you. And we believe in using AI to do the same for animation, choosing your camera angles, having your characters animate based on just audio or based on just text, and then having that scene feel beautifully, effortlessly cinematic is our vision for the future.
Oh, I love that. Effortlessly cinematic. Sounds like you've got like lots of different really amazing technologies in the platform. You've got machine learning, you've got some AI. You're obviously using a lot of camera techniques as well in order to enable that point and shoot side of things. Tell me a little bit more about what are the technical features embedded in Aquifer?
So within Aquifer today, we have facial motion capture. We have the ability to choose and create virtual cameras. So virtual cameras are just cameras that you use to shoot a full 3D scene, but we're making that accessible in mobile.
Virtual cameras, I love that. Okay, wait, so meaning that you can have all different versions of cameras that you would use like on an actual movie set to shoot a person, but you've got the virtual versions of it within your platform.
Exactly. So just on the mobile app itself, you can choose to create dolly cameras, which are cameras that like move from one stationary point to another at a pre-designated speed. You can actually choose handheld view, where you can kind of like shoot a video and it would get that like light tremble to get that like handheld feel. So, we believe in enabling all sorts of creative possibilities in animation that you have in live action and making it very, very simple. We're also very close to finishing our body motion capture technology, which would allow you to do skeletal tracking with mobile and then be able to translate that in real time to a virtual character. So you can perform the latest TikTok dance without knowing anything special, maybe except for how to dance, and then be able to animate that in just a few seconds. And we'll continue to push, the AI and the predictive capabilities so that we can further shortcut that creation time to even being able to designate the format of video that you're looking to make, the length of video, and then just composing the cameras and the movements for you based on a couple of quick choices.
Wow, that's really fascinating, because I can imagine that will be like an impediment in the future too, because right now you're targeting people who like they know what kind of videos that they want to make. But as you start to get closer and closer towards, non-professional users or brands, creatives who don't necessarily have, the technical shoot knowledge, to be able to automatically do that for them is tremendous.
Yeah. Video-based storytelling follows like a lot of very similar formats. So for like longer episodic, there's like beginning, middle, and end. And depending on how you break that up, whether it's like a 5-minute episode, a 12-minute episode, or a 30-minute episode, there are suggestions we can make in the platform directly that would shortcut that decision making. Something we often hear is, can I make a 15-second like quick social video and a longer episodic video with Aquifer? And the answer is yes. And we want to be able to say, okay, make a choice. Like today, I want to make like 4 15-second videos and 1 longer episodic. And the platform can predictively sort of set those up for you with kind of best in class, formats. And then you can go in there and tweak it and make it your own and add little flair here and there. But a lot of the like nuts and bolts of just kind of putting those edits together, the platform should take care of for you.
That's amazing. I mean, one of the things as we were doing our insights report over the summer, we were looking at, virtual production and video production as a whole. And one person that we talked to said that within the next, 15 years, we will see somebody make it to the stage of, like the Oscars, who has made a video with one person, no film crew, nothing like that. Do you think that that's, is it a 15-year kind of thing for animation, or is it even shorter than that?
Oh, I think it's much shorter than that. I think we have aspirations of being able to support creators who are creating Netflix caliber, Amazon Prime caliber content within the next 5 years. And I think with the democratization of this technology, what we'll see is like people won't be competing with each other based on knowledge of technical expertise. They'll be really competing on the merit of storytelling and creativity, which is ultimately, I think, what all of these enabling technologies do, is take away kind of that artificial barrier of having access to very, very expensive hardware and software in order to put together a beautiful film.
Interesting. And so, we've seen a lot of companies that are doing stuff or thinking about the way that they can analyze feeds as they exist today, figure out what are the features that make them viral hits and things like this, to automatically integrate that or recommend how to create the next generation of content for a brand or for a person.
Mhm.
Is that something that you guys are doing as well? It sounds like, it's kind of like an embedded part of this AI storytelling feature.
Yeah, I mean, I think those formats are definitely being dictated by a lot of the publishing platforms out there today. You think of like what is so addictive about TikTok videos is that they often have a punchline. Like there's a
Mm,
setup, and then there's a couple seconds of suspense, and then there's some kind of punchline at the end that like resolves for the viewer and makes them feel super satisfied and gets them to kind of go to that next video. And
mm,
that is basically like an age old format of essentially joke telling, right? There's like setup, suspense,
yeah.
punchline. And we absolutely want to build that kind of capability into the platform. It's like instead of like spending a long time thinking about like, well, what should the setup be? How long should that suspense be? And what should my punchline be? It should just be there for you as a first pass. And then you can adjust it later on.
That's really cool. It seems like there's so much that you could do, right? There's so many different features that you can build. There must be like so many demands across all of the potential customers and customers that you're working with.
Mhm.
Um, you know, how do you prioritize which things to work on and when? Like that's kind of like your sweet spot, right? Like
Yeah.
as a product person, what's your trick to figuring out where you should spend your time?
Our number one way to prioritize is always value delivery, and value delivery in the form of what would enable our customers to create content that grows their brands and transparently
Mhm.
makes them money. And so because our customers are brands, they're like actively engaging in social to grow the fan base, but there's huge opportunities to drive revenue now in the metaverse and across social media, whether
Yep.
it's through kind of like the ability to give gifts on TikTok, or
Yeah.
even like live streams on like Twitch deals. I think they're all like legitimate kind of monetization channels, digital merch, NFTs, physical merch. So we are prioritizing the features that we build first on what can we put into the hands of our customers that enables a creative flexibility that gives them additional revenue opportunities always. So
Yeah.
the next big feature we're going to be rolling out in addition to body tracking is live streaming. And live streaming for brands and creators is a huge revenue driver. And so we want to be able to enable sort of like a Code Miko type experience without the
Yeah.
massive team that she has at her disposal, to be able to stream as a virtual character, a virtual persona, and tell stories,
Yeah.
that are much more varied than just seeing a character kind of talk on camera neck up. That character should be able to motion around the room, interact with
Yeah.
props, tell you about their lives, and really engage with their audiences in the way that a real person would.
It's so interesting because, today, um, we think so much of being able to either, have an animated or like a fake background behind us, right? Or have a fake person, but being able to have the two that interact with and move with each other is something that like we just haven't really seen come to fruition yet. Which,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it raises the other question. You work across all platforms, right? So like you could as easily, like export a video from Aquifer and put it on TikTok as you could now seems like you could live stream onto Twitch or
Mm-hmm.
Facebook or anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think like YouTube Live and Twitch are kind of the two big players for our customers, and so we want to
Yep.
enable the ability on desktop to be able to very quickly kind of like OBS directly into those channels, or multiple channels at the same time, depending on
Yep.
what their business model is. But then simultaneously, someone could be live streaming with Aquifer, and then someone else on the team could be creating TikTok videos or Instagram videos, or posting creating like a mixed reality video for YouTube. Like because we have definitely those like top platforms in mind, and want to make it as easy and as flexible as we can for our customers.
That's great. And I guess like in terms of being able to live stream as well, when I look at live streaming, so much that's happening there, and hopefully it'll be so much more, right? But right now it's all in the gaming space. But so far, we haven't really seen any companies be able to monetize the actual characters of the game, to play or to live stream themselves or to like get in on this whatsoever. Has the biggest limitation been that there wasn't any, like the capabilities to take the brand's IP, like a specific character from a game, and bring them into a live stream or have them own that live stream?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been like, there's been a couple of factors. Like before, you really needed a huge team to pull that off, because you had to have a physical setup with body motion tracking, facial motion tracking, green screen into some virtual background. You had to make all those assets. There's actually a ton of setup, and it's tens of thousands of dollars to get that set up for like character live streaming, from like modeling the character to modeling the background to getting the suit set up to rigging the character so it all looks good when they move in real time. And then having technical experts who can then manage that stream out of the game engine, which is like kind of where all the motions are tracked and the scene is put together and rendered. So it's typically like a 5+ person team to pull that off, and it takes a lot of time to set up. If anyone listening has ever like tried to set up like a body motion capture suit, there's at least like 30 minutes to an hour of just calibrating to make sure it's tracking your body properly. So like that all takes a ton of time, and you can imagine as an investment for a brand, that's a pretty massive investment, basically, to set up an entire team just to do this. And especially with that team having to be in person to set this up in one physical space together, COVID limitations obviously put a stop to that as well. It's typically not something that one creator can just do with a webcam.
Well, and like on top of it, that would be for one for one character, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to multiply that across multiple characters, and you want to have everybody have different presences in different ways. And it makes a lot of sense that like it just isn't feasible today to really make this happen and generate significant value versus when the value kind of proposition that you guys bring to the table. That's super exciting. One of the things that like I love to do at kind of like the end of these sessions after we've talked so much like serious stuff is kind of like hit you up with a bunch of fun questions.
Yeah.
So okay, we're gonna play rapid fire.
Okay.
Right?
Awesome.
So I'm gonna ask you a question and you've got to give like a one-word answer.
Okay.
So, favorite cartoon growing up?
Cinderella.
Ooh, brand mascot that's most embedded in your brain.
Tony the Tiger.
It's great.
It's great. Yeah. Love Frosted Flakes.
If you could or you had to live in a video game, which video game would you pick?
Zelda. It's the prettiest.
Do you have a favorite virtual influencer or VTuber?
Probably I like Code Miko. I think she's like really pushing the boundaries.
What brand have you not connected with yet, but that they should be using Aquifer?
The NBA.
Interesting. And if you had to pick one entrepreneur that you really look up to, either that you know or you don't.
Melanie Perkins of Canva.
Fascinating. And they've just had a bunch coming out about them, right?
They just launched videos, and I'm like, okay, Canva's now gonna like murder the video editing game because they're always so design focused, and I think that's like such a strength of theirs.
Melanie's an all-star for sure. Well, thank you so much. The question that we wrap up on typically is, if computers didn't exist, what would your career choice have been?
I would have been an architect because that's actually what I got into undergrad for.
That's great.
I would be like, like a drafting table, physical model architect. I think that would be so much fun.
Amazing. With like your ruler, like measuring out millimeters
exactly, like
scale.
Cutting out like tiny pieces of wood to make models. I would love that so much.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, Chen, thank you so much for joining me today to tell us all about Aquifer and your route to being an entrepreneur and how you're overcoming a lot of the challenges associated with being an early stage business and building, as well as what your big vision is for the future and how Aquifer is going to impact every business, brand, consumer out there in the long haul. Pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks so much, Abby. This is really fun.